The imagery passing through your psyche in daydreams, waking dreams, sleeping dreams, whatever, is not at all random. It is indicative of your current psychological life and reflective of how you interact with the wider world. Because imagination is not just pictures inside the mind, imagination is woven into perception. And while the dragon, for example, that we meet in a dream might not be there when you wake up and open your eyes, there will be dragon-like people in dragon-like situations. So this video, the 8th in our Waking Dreams Basic series, is all about helping you to notice the pattern or template of this spontaneously arising imagery, so as to better notice and work with the activity of imagery in normal, waking, everyday life. The temptation when waking up from a dream or at the end of a waking dream is to ask the question, what does that mean? And to get into figuring out the imagery, to interpret the imagery. Now that's fine and it has a place. However, if we want to enhance our imaginative life, basically what we're doing there is moving from imagining into thinking. And if we put all this energy into cultivating the imaginal perception to notice these images, we might want to hold back on interpretation. So a second response is to assume that nothing else needs to be done, that the imagery in itself has been healing and transformative, which is true. However, that misses out on a further potential that we can derive from the dreaming, which is to look to the pattern of imagery within the dreaming and to see how it's reflective of a wider pattern repeating in our normal everyday life. And in that way we maintain an image-centric perspective. We're still focusing on imagery. We're not turning it into ideas or explanations. And we are allowing the work that we've done in the waking dream or in our sleep, even in a sleeping dream, to spill over into an imaginal sensitivity to the activity of images in everyday life. So I'm going to break down how to do that into 3 patterning steps. The first step is to clarify the template, or the basic pattern if you like, which we do by studying any piece of discrete image work or indeed a sleeping dream. A proviso being that this image work has followed the spontaneously arising imagery of the psyche. In other words, it's not been some kind of set piece framework or guided visualization from a textbook or whatever. It needs to have followed the spontaneously arising imagery of the psyche, of the dreamer, for it to have a relevance, a wider relevance beyond the exercise. What I like to do is turn it into a little fairy tale, a little story with the opening line. Here's a story about a man who, or here's a story of a woman who, and then I sort of summarize the narrative essence. So I remove any particular details to make a sort of generic narrative. So for example, there's a waking dream and the waking dreamer comes out of the tube station. He sees this little caterpillar on the pavement in imminent danger of being trampled to death by the horde of commuters coming out behind him. So he rushes forward, reaches down to save the caterpillar, only to realise it's just a curled up leaf. Panic over. So the narrative summary goes something like this. Here's a story about a man who finds himself in this emergency situation in which he is called to act urgently, only to discover subsequently that there is no such emergency. So I've taken out the details of leaf, tube station, caterpillar, etc., etc. And in that way I've summarised in a generic way the pattern. If you get that pattern right, or as close to accurate as you can, and then we can move into step 2. What can help you, just a little tip, is to read a Grimm's fairy tale every day, and that'll help you strengthen up your narrative muscles. So that's step number one: clarify the template, the basic pattern. So the second step is to look for the pattern jumping away from the waking dream, the discrete piece of image work or sleeping dream, into normal everyday life. And this often happens spontaneously as we're clarifying the pattern. Other situations will come to mind that are reflective of that pattern. So for example, with the guy who saw the caterpillar that was a leaf, he recognized that in the morning he often downloaded his emails, saw a bunch of difficult situations that he needed to respond quickly to. He would fire off some replies, only later on in the day to receive further emails saying that he'd rushed in, he'd misunderstood the situation, and there wasn't a panic on, in the same way that he'd mistook the leaf for a caterpillar. And in this way, through jumping from the waking dream into normal everyday life, we begin to see the activity of images in normal everyday life. We're moving through imagination. Imagination surrounds us and we pass through it. It's not just inside us when we close our eyes. So that's step two, jumps into everyday life. And then step number three is called intricacy, which happens over a period of time through dwelling upon the pattern, through continuing to notice it in our lives. We come to see it, we come to perceive it on an ever more fine-grained scale of attention. So for example, with our caterpillar leaf example, he came to notice with the emails the sense of emergency as he was writing the email to fire it off. And then a further refinement was noticing the sense of emergency not as he was sending the email, but as he was reading the email that he thought was an emergency. So, in other words, the gap becomes less about a retrospective living within the pattern and more an in the moment sense of being within this imaginal scenario, and that creates the perspective, that creates the imaginal perception needed to then step back, take another decision, and begin to rewrite or reimagine the story of who we are and the world that we live in.